No.
We talked about, I asked you if you had it to do all over again, your whole of your life, what would you change? Do you remember what you said?
No.
You said, not a thing.
Oh, okay,
Nothing.
Good, not a thing.
And then the other thing we did was I said, would you sing a song? And you said yes, and you sang a song. Would you sing another one?
Okay.
Okay. There you go.
Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Once had a heart, could not be told. But now these dreams have grown so cold. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Once upon in love, my love does not too bright burn. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams. Goodbye, sweet dreams.
Yeah, I like it.
Listen, paying for What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the 5th episode of the Sewer Symposium podcast. Today we're doing an episode on Roky Erickson, and I'm joined by Highwayman64, aka my dad.
Hey everybody, what's up? How you doing?
So we're going to talk about, like I said, Roky Erickson, but the beginning of all this is early Netflix days. My dad contacted me and said that he had watched this documentary called "You're Gonna Miss Me," and he was just telling me about the story about Roky. And I had Netflix at the time, so I had to immediately go watch it, and it's definitely a crazy documentary. If you don't know anything about Roky, it pretty much sums up his whole story. But we're going to talk about a couple things with Roky today, just early life, the things that would later happen to him, and then his life after the things that would happen to him. So I guess we can start this with Roky was born in Dallas, Texas, July 15th of 1947. And then I'll let you take it from there, Dad.
And then his mom her name was Evelyn, and his father's name was Roger. He started taking piano lessons at the age of 4, and then he went on to take guitar lessons. He had 4 brothers. He and his 4 brothers were sexually abused by their father. The father was an alcoholic, and Rocky's earlier influences was Buddy Holly, Little Richard, and Bob Dylan. His first band that he was ever in was called the Spades.
That was in what, 72?
No, actually, it was before then.
Oh, it was before. Yeah, it was way before that.
Yeah, because the Spades was his first band that he was ever in, and that's where he wrote his hit "You're Gonna Miss Me" when he was 15 years old. He did not play that then or write it for that band. He held on to that until he went to the 13th floor elevators.
So actually was 1965 was when the Spades started. And not to cut you off or anything, but his dad was also like an architect and a civil engineer. So
that's new, because I really didn't know that much about his father.
Yeah, his dad was an architect and a civil engineer. So and his mom, like you said, she was an opera singer and pretty much an amateur artist.
Yes.
So yeah, Roky, like you said, he had 4 brothers.
Yeah. And I do know that before he graduated high school, there's speculations on this. He was either kicked out for having long hair, or he just decided to quit himself. I'm not sure which actually really happened back then, but he actually didn't finish high school.
Yeah, so like you said, he made the song "You're Gonna Miss Me" at the age of 15 when he was in the band the Spades.
Yes.
And then so it would have been before 65, because the elevators started in late 65 when Roky was 18.
Right. And in 1965, that's when he met Tommy Hall.
Yeah, so those two co-founded the Elevators, and were the main songwriters of the Elevators, of the 13th floor Elevators, for those that don't know.
Yes, and they were called the Linksmen when he met Tommy Hall and the rest of the band. And then they became the 13th Floor Elevators. And they decided to be called the 13th Floor Elevators because there's no 13th floor on any tall high-rise
Right.
building.
It's a superstition.
Yes.
So yeah,
so I thought that was pretty cool.
So, the 13th Floor Elevators ended up releasing 3 albums throughout their whole time. Psychedelic Sounds of 13th Floor Elevators in 66. They released Easter Everywhere in 67, and they released Bull of the Woods in March of 69. And then that was before what kind of started to happen with Roky, because in 68 he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, right?
Yes.
I don't know much about the hospital. Was it a state hospital or something?
It was. Well, what had happened was he had traveled with the 13th Floor Elevator to San Francisco. We're in 66 when they probably released, what was it, their second album in 66?
Second album was in 67. So yeah, it would have been around 67.
Yeah, so they were on American Bandstand, and I do know they went to San Francisco, and they went on to influence people like Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead and Janis Joplin. And then during those travel times, Roky started dabbling in pills and psychedelics.
Well, and it could be said that the 13th Floor Elevators were kind of, like you and I talked about before, kind of the innovators. I've said it on, and their music was, as I've seen it said, a vocal proponent for the use of pot at the time and psychedelic drugs. So it was kind of their whole shtick,
Yeah, absolutely. And I do know that during that traveling, Roky had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, I think I saw something about he started speaking gibberish on stage or some shit at I don't remember where it was, but he started speaking gibberish on stage, and that's when they ended up taking him to that hospital, and he was diagnosed.
Went home, and then he got diagnosed for schizophrenia. Yes, and then he was institutionalized at some point in time during that.
Yeah, and that was so Roky was Roky was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 68, and then he in 69 he got caught with that joint, and he was facing up to 10 years, but instead pleaded not guilty to avoid the jail time. Pleaded by reason of insanity.
Yes. Yeah, and then that's when he went to the maximum security hospital, which was called Rusk State Hospital. And
this is all in Texas. This is all in Texas, by the way.
Yes, and he actually received electrical shock therapy there.
Yeah. Well, that was so like you were telling me earlier, something that you didn't know about Roky, and kind of something that I didn't know about Roky was he had made several escapes, and you were saying that Tommy Hall helped him in some of those.
Yes, that's when he first got diagnosed with the early sides of schizophrenia.
Yeah, so then they put him in Rusk, and then after a couple more escape attempts in Rusk, that's when they start electroshock therapy and Thorazine treatments. And Roky pretty much remained in there until 72.
Yes. Yep. He was released in 72. And then in 75, that's when he went to form with the group The Aliens. But prior to that, it was called, what was it? Bleep?
Yeah. So
You want to explain that?
Yeah. So in 74, he started not long after he was released from the state hospital. He started the band called Bleeb Alien, Bleeb being a anagram for the word Bible and also the German word for remain. And then alien was a pun on the German word. It was, I believe, pronounced alien. It was just with a second L in it, but it was the German word for alone. So ultimately, their name would Bleeb Alien was technically remain alone, and that's kind of something that could be said about Rocky's mind in general. Even though all these drugs and everything were a big part of Rocky, somewhat of a genius in the way that he thought out things, and just pretty much all geniuses are kind of crazy people. So
yeah, pretty much.
So I think a lot could be said about even early names like that Rocky came up with, and the thought that was kind of put into that kind of. It says a lot about Rocky's thought process, or how in depth that he's willing to go with things, and then so basically, Bleeb Alien would become Roky and the Roky Erickson and the Aliens in 79 is when they changed the name.
Mm-hmm.
And also around that time, he had like Rocky and the Explosives, and he was just doing a lot. But Rocky and the Aliens stands out to me, and specifically for this channel, because they were no longer like the Elevators. The Elevators, like you said, the people that they inspired, Janis Joplin, and a lot of those early acts, psychedelic-wise. The Aliens had like a more harder rock sound, like like Two-Headed Dog, like I played in the beginning. And their lyrics were all like horror movie style lyrics,
Yeah, like vampires.
Yeah, and Creature with the Atom Brain, and there were all reasons why Rocky wrote these songs, but I think around then, like, he was heavily influenced by horror movies, obviously, early horror movies. Yeah, so
he also had 2 marriages too.
During this time, or
well, and I would imagine one of his first marriage was during this time as well. Not sure of the dates on his 2 marriages, but I do remember that both were unsuccessful due to drug use between him and the wife, and not to mention his mental instability as far as his schizophrenia and stuff like that. So, but during those early times that he was with the Aliens, the Explosives, and trying hard to make a name for himself, he was actually, even though he was writing the music and performing the music, he actually was living in poverty because he wasn't getting any of his royalties from the labels.
Even the 13th floor elevator days, right?
Well, I don't know about then, but I do know that when he was doing his own thing with the Aliens and the Explosives and stuff like that, he wasn't getting his royalties at all. Because later on, his younger brother has to come in and step in and, take care of business basically for him. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
So Rocky is released. he starts the aliens. What time frame are we looking at where things started to kind of go downhill for Rocky in a sense of around the time that he lived with his mom for what did he live with his mom, or did he live on his own first after he was released?
He actually he was doing the with the aliens. He was basically doing his thing on his own. And you know, his marriages were away from home. You know, he didn't live at home with mom or anything like that during his marriages or anything. But I do know that when at some point in time when both of his marriages didn't work out, he did end up moving back with his mom, and then that's when he quit performing for over a decade. So
this would have been right around the time with what I mentioned to you. So when Rocky was pretty much at the lowest of the low, there's a scene in the movie You're Gonna Miss Me, or the documentary, I should say, where Rocky's, it looks like he's sitting in a basement of some sorts, surrounded by paintings that I'm assuming his mom has done most of. And he plays this song For You, which he would later re-release when he got, you know, when he got pretty much his life back together. So he plays For You, and I had to bring it up because if you've ever seen the documentary, or if you haven't seen the documentary, you can just see what a broken ass dude he was during this time. And, you know, I don't think the drugs 100% put Rocky where he was at. I think a lot of it, you know, a good other half of it was the electroshock therapy and Thorazine treatments that he went through, and just time spent. Too. Well, just time spent at a place like that too. Yeah. Because, you know, I mean, even though Rocky was diagnosed with schizophrenia in '68. You know, it might not even have been full effect when he was put in that hospital, and then you're put into this mental hospital, and probably, I would assume, on top of Thorazine or whatever treatments he was getting, they were giving him meds, I would assume, to help handle his schizophrenia. And then so you're almost somewhat of a normal person under those types of meds, but you're surrounded by all this craziness and these people. I thought about it earlier today. It's very, very much like the movie One That Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, actually, you're right, because I do know that I had seen where when he was in there in the Rusk State Hospital, and he actually, him and some of the inmates actually formed a little band in there, and he was actually playing music with, you know, people who had committed murder, people who committed child rape.
I definitely saw pictures of him with some of those people around that time.
I mean, and what a life would that be, you know? Being alone in a place like that too, on top of being schizophrenic. I'm sure the drugs that he did,
and the government's trying to put you away for 10 years for a joint, you know.
Yeah.
In 1969 of all years. Yeah. But apparently Texas didn't play that shit back then.
Well, I mean, honestly, they don't really play a lot nowadays. I mean, they're
right,
ready to electrocute anybody at any point in time, honestly.
Right. So you can imagine the state hospitals that he went through in the Rusk place. So, you know, when Rocky's released, you know, Rocky is no longer, you know, Rocky from the 13th floor elevators. He's pretty much a totally different person.
And then he didn't take his meds either when he did get out. He did not want to take his meds.
Well, I think part of that goes back to what you said about his mom. I think his mom had convinced him that these meds would do more damage to him than good. is what
Possibly.
I kind of took out of it. Or she had just
possibly
convinced him to believe that.
Yeah, I honestly think that she had mental instabilities herself. Because I mean,
Well,
I
and
seen the
she was,
documentary,
yeah, she was very her relationship with Rocky alone was talked about in the documentary. As far as, you know, Rocky, I don't know what age he was in comparison to his brothers. I know the brother that would go on to help him was obviously younger than he was.
yes,
But yeah, I don't know what age he would have been, but you know, his mom has 4 kids and has this kind of somewhat odd, and maybe it's because of, you know, the shit that Rocky had been through, and I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak for that, but I don't know what I would feel if my son or daughter was locked up for 10 years, you know, or up to 10 years, and then ended up going to the state hospital, you know, a mental institution, essentially. And, you know, them going through all of that shit and then releasing them. I don't, maybe she did feel somewhat guilty, as a parent, and, her mental instability, like you said, did not help Rocky's situation at all during that time. If anything, it from what I saw and from what I've read, it enabled it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we don't know what his mother could have went through during those times either, you know. So, because I really don't know too much.
Yeah,
about her life,
I don't know too much about either of his parents' backstories, other than what we've already touched on. But you know, Rocky had started to kind of put on a bunch of weight around that time. You know, there was a point where his teeth were in terrible shape. I remember that in the documentary. And then you can talk about his, I don't know how the man lived this way, but his electric friends, as you were telling me earlier.
His electric friends, so-called, were televisions and stereo receivers, speakers,
basically anything electronically that you could plug in or put batteries in that made sound.
Yeah, and he would turn these up just so that he could relax and rest.
Yeah, I remember that being a really, really crazy point in the documentary, because I had to kind of put myself in Rocky's shoes of, it was making me go insane to listen to all of these things.
Yeah.
So the opposite could be said in somebody like Rocky's position at that time, where maybe so much is going on in this man's head that is the only way he can drown out the other things that he was going through during that time. And he just kicked back and put his sunglasses down and sat there and relaxed. And it was just kind
very
of almost disturbing to me.
Yeah, very odd. I don't see how anybody could do something like that. But then again, if you're not in their state of mind, you wouldn't know, I guess.
Yeah, I think, you know, similar to, like I mentioned, the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, they didn't do no, like, full frontal lobe lobotomy on Rocky, per se. But I'm sure these electroshock therapy treatments that he went through definitely didn't better his situation during the time, and so you know, it's almost like more of Rocky's pre-existing mental conditions would be almost cranked up by 10, you know.
Well, and then too, you gotta understand, back then, you know, that electric shock therapy was a it was still being, you know,
studied
it was still being part of a study to see if it would even work on not just Rocky, but tons of patients. And I'm sure that the Thorazine and certain other meds were the same way. I mean, they are today, even when you can't get a a person that has mental behavioral issues, sometimes their meds have to be changed, accordingly. And sometimes the doctor don't always make the right decisions, because they don't know what's best suited for that person.
Well, yeah, because I mean, obviously everyone's different, and
Yeah.
Rocky, Rocky was in such bad shape in a sense of mentally that it's almost like I definitely remember there were times where they tried to bring up to him certain things that he had done, these monumental things in any normal person's life. And it's almost like Rocky didn't want to acknowledge it. Like he didn't even want to believe or acknowledge that these things took place or existed. Almost like the musician Roky Erickson was never even a thing.
Yeah, until, somebody would when they started the filming of the documentary, and then the person would go over there, and then his mom broke out the family album, and then he started showing the pictures, and then his mind started going back to, the days when he made the music and wrote the songs,
and it's really crazy.
Pepping up.
It's really crazy, and it should be noted that during what you're talking about, Rocky is almost in the state of mind of a child. Like he has a Mr. Potato Head in one of the scenes, and I felt absolutely mind blown that somebody with the mind like Rocky had in the early days was at this point in their life mentally. And like you were saying, he kind of pepped up when they started to show those types of things. I don't know if his mom kept those things away from him or what the thing was, but yeah, he pepped up, and it's crazy to me to really think that you listen to early 13th Floor Elevator songs, and knowing that Rocky wrote that song at 15 years old, and then you see him at that point in the movie, and you almost lose hope because of how far gone he is at that point.
Yeah, well, and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, which luckily there was for Rocky when he did make it out of all of that because of his little brother. But I remember a thing in the documentary too, where he went to the mailbox and he got a publisher clearinghouse.
Yeah.
What was it? Reader's Digest sweepstake or something out of the box.
Yeah.
And he wanted to fill it out because he wanted to win that money, so bad.
Yeah, that was all that was important to him during that time. At that point in time, he shut down everything and just wanted to talk about Publishers Clearinghouse. What's up, Alkaline?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I almost forgot about that, but
yeah,
it's a great documentary, though. If people out there haven't seen it,
it's really, really Rocky's story is a sad
very
story,
sad.
And I think that's why it was so important to do this. Was like I mentioned to you earlier, every other musician, and there's more that I can name. There's more that I could do. And there will be more that I do podcasts on. There are just these once-in-a-lifetime musicians that live, eat, and breathe music, and they just totally get it. They totally understand music. And I think Rocky was that person, but like I said before, it's every genius or, mainly artists, mostly those guys mainly are always crazy people. They just have minds.
Einstein was one of them.
Yeah, minds like no other. And Rocky It's crazy to me because I don't think that Rocky to this day still gets the. I'm sure in a certain scene that he does, but does not get the love and the respect that he truly deserves because, as you said, he did influence these people. You can hear, Janis Joplin's scream, like I mentioned to you earlier on in the day. You can tell that was very, very influenced by Rocky. Rocky was doing that in the 13th floor elevator days at the age of 18,
Mm-hmm. And it's good that we're just paying homage to such a great musician and songwriter,
Well, yeah, and
because
just
he's not been recognized by a lot of people. A lot of people don't even know who that is because they
that's
explore that side of music.
That's the important thing about this is pretty much just letting people know, the ins and outs of Rocky, and that's why. Knowing these ins and outs, his music might make more sense to you in the sense of, him starting out with the 13th floor elevators, and then there was these major changes, not only in his music, but him as a person. Like we were talking about it earlier today. There's an interview you were telling me about. Does it look like he's sitting in like a big wicker chair during this interview?
Yes,
yeah.
He has a blue T-shirt on, and this is when he's talking about being the man of many the man in the robe of many colors, like from the Bible, because he's like, part of me feels like a ghost, part of me feels like a vampire, part of me feels like an alien with a big brain, So, and if you get a chance, you could, it's on YouTube, and just type in Roky Erickson's life, and you'll see a lot of stuff on Rocky and the 13th floor elevators. You might even, I don't think you can get to see You're Gonna Miss Me. You might be able to find
No,
it
actually, You're Gonna Miss Me is quite the hard find, especially if you're looking for, a streaming copy of it. It's not. I don't think it's on any streaming sites anymore. I could be totally wrong, but actually,
I haven't seen it in a while.
I was lucky enough to catch a hell of a deal on it. For a physical copy of it, which I never thought I would own.
Yeah, I don't even own it.
I'm trying to look up the price, like the overall what it goes for these days, and how easy it is to track down. Yeah. So I think I got it for like $20, and I'm seeing one on Amazon right now for $23.16.
Okay, well that's not bad.
So not bad, but definitely a harder to find documentary in the sense of, I've looked for it after you told me about it. I looked for it on other places hoping to find it. I do believe at one point it was up on YouTube, and you can find some clips of it up on YouTube. But yeah, you can't really find the full documentary these days unless you buy a physical copy of it. And like I said, maybe it's on streaming sites.
I do believe you can get their. I don't know too much about the 13th floor elevator vinyls. I do know that there's one out there that is on 180 gram vinyl. But I don't know. I don't know if it may be their first album that they did.
The psychedelic sounds of the 13th floor elevators. The most the most kind of sought after one.
Yeah. So, and you can get that new. I mean, if you like listening to that style of music, or want to dive into something like that, which I like all styles usually.
Well, and that leads right into what I was just gonna say. You like all styles of music, and that's something else that kind of needs to be touched on about Rocky is you listen to. I'm sure the Spades were different sounding. Everything that he created had its own sound to it, but definitely his own touch on it. You could tell it was Rocky. But it just, 13th floor elevators is leaps and bounds different from Roky Erickson and the Aliens, and the other groups that he was part of.
I think one of the most unique things that they did with the 13th floor elevators was Tommy Hall playing the jug the way that he did. If any of you people have never heard the song You're Gonna Miss Me by the 13th Floor Elevators, get on YouTube, look it up, and you can watch the guy playing the jug and the echoing that he had behind this just a regular jug was pretty incredible itself, just the sound.
Yeah, 13th floor elevators themselves were good, kind of ahead of their time. Innovators for, like I said, psychedelic rock, and they just definitely left a mark on that whole scene. And there are people in the documentary, people that were close to Rocky, that were brought, into his life by the music that he made. Those people still, will listen to, they were talking about when they were just fans, and they would listen to the album front to back over and over again. They were just, for that time, that kind of band, and doing something new that not a lot of other bands had kind of done on the same level that the Elevators were doing. And I really think that's, even Roky Erickson and the Aliens, I think it's still, not only does it hold up, but it also is kind of like ahead of itself in the riffs that Rocky was writing at that time. To me, sounded unique. People could say that there are some lyrics, like for the song "I Walked with a Zombie." That's pretty much the lyrics for the whole song, but it's just Rocky's brain and his love for those types of things definitely shined in bands like the Elevators and the Aliens and whatnot. But yeah, I think that all of the music that Rocky has been part of has kind of been at the very least, the words that you could use is unique.
Absolutely. And then, obviously later on, he did go to inspire other people who actually knew a little bit about his life and his background and his music. And, people like Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top and the band REM, they actually did a couple remakes on some of the songs that the 13th Floor Elevators have done in the past. But to see that these newer bands went back to help out the older bands is pretty amazing too, because a lot of times you don't see the unity between a lot of the different bands.
Also,
simply because you're trying to produce your own thing, so.
I do have to point out something that I just realized that I was wrong about is the band didn't, like you were saying before, they switched to Roky Erickson and the Aliens, but that wasn't in 79. Around 79 is when he started to form the Explosives. Okay. And then they released that album. I think it was called Casting the Runes was the album that he released with, and I believe it was a live album.
See, I need to find some of these albums just so that I can have them on vinyl. Maybe that's what I'll do later on when we're not on here is to look up some, and
The
I'm sure some of them are
the
run some
crazy
money though.
the crazy thing that I didn't know until I was reading his Wikipedia today. And not all of Wikipedia is right.
Right,
They're
absolutely.
the only way that they would know that there was 100% correct is by sitting down with Rocky, which is obviously, unfortunately, no longer possible. But in '95, he released an album on the drummer from the Butthole Surfers label.
Yes.
I did not know that. And I don't know. I love Butthole Surfers were a weird band, but another band that I loved. And it's cool that those people all, all those people that you mentioned, REM,
Collaborated with them and
Michael
stuff,
Stipe,
yeah.
and all those guys started to try to, was well. We'll talk about Sumner and Rocky's brother Sumner, and how that ended up. You can go ahead and and talk about that.
Well, in 2001, his younger brother Sumner knew what his older brother was going through, what kind of housing that Rocky was living in with his mom. It was kind of like a low-income housing.
Well, and as you've
Rocky
said, his we didn't mention it in this this podcast yet, but his mom was a hoarder. So
Yes.
so
And so was
terrible
Rocky.
terrible conditions as far as housing goes, but also
Yeah.
hoarding involved.
Yes, well, from her and Rocky himself. I mean, I'm sure it started with her being the hoarder because he lived there, quite some time with his mom. So he probably brought things in too, I'm sure. And she enabled that. But yeah, so his little brother, Sumner, seen that the conditions that his brother was living in, and he knew that his brother shouldn't be living in poverty for all these years with all the songs that the man has wrote and performed, and he knew that his brother was entitled to some of these royalties, and his mom wasn't really helping him out a whole lot. She, like I said, Rocky wasn't taking his meds. She wasn't enforcing his meds. Um, so his little brother said, "You know what? I'm going to go and try and get custody of my older brother and give him a better life, the kind of life that he should have." So he actually took his own mother to court and fought for custody for his older brother, who was schizophrenic and having all these mental issues and instabilities in his life, and wanted to give his brother a better life. So he actually ended up winning the court case, and then he would go on to take his older brother Rocky to Pittsburgh, PA.
Which,
Um,
by the way, once Sumner got Rocky in his care, Rocky was, he actually was able to get the best legal aid and medical aid that he had ever had in his life. So, a lot could be said for Sumner not only wanting to do this for his brother, but once he did do it, he was able to get Rocky. Sumner was actually, I believe, in a good position in his life. I don't know what he was doing at the time.
he actually was playing for an orchestra.
Oh yeah. They talk. He
Yeah,
did talk about that in the documentary.
yeah. So he owned a nice home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he was actually playing a. I don't. I want to say it was a tuba, but I'm not sure. So don't quote me on that. But I do know he played a musical instrument for an orchestra, and he actually got his brother and moved his brother in. I'm sure it was hard for both of them trying to do a transition like that.
Well, especially in the condition that Rocky was at this point, because he was like I brought up earlier, he already had these problems with his teeth really bad, which his brother had to help him out with. He
Glasses.
could barely walk almost, you know. And it wasn't because of him being overweight, or I would say that Rocky had put on some weight, but I don't think he was overweight during the time. It was just all Rocky had done is sit in this house with his mom and
listen to his electronic friends.
yeah,
basically.
and so I remember Sumner, when Sumner had him in PA, he took him to like those yoga classes and started to get Rocky to like moving again. But you can imagine, back to what you were saying, is Rocky's going through this big change in his life. All of this is new to Sumner, having his brother live with him, but also Rocky is just now getting back on these medications that he should have been on years ago. So all in all, probably not an easy transition for either of them.
No, absolutely not. On either end, for sure. I can't even imagine, you know, being so I'm your dad, but I can't imagine having, you know, my older brother, going through some craziness and trying to help him, and then, you know, he's trying to bring his everyday routine into your home, and then you got to try and help him do your everyday routine, and it's just
Plus getting him out of these bad habits that Rocky had already had, you know, living in the condition that Rocky was. And because there were times that you could see Rocky being kind of obviously, even when he was starting to be medicated in the beginning, there were some times where Rocky butted heads with Sumner, because their lifestyles were night and day. You know, Rocky
absolutely.
had gone from being this big time musician at one point, and as you said, not even really getting the fucking royalties and shit that he deserved, or even the respect and love that he deserved. But then he went from that to, you know, full on losing his mind at a mental institution, being released to his mom, who is kind of has her own mental issues and shit going on. And then Rocky becomes like this hermit, and his brother is trying to, you know, get him to do this 180 in his life, so that Rocky can, you know, see all of this shit that he's deserving of, and
just be a human again. You know?
Yeah,
just
yeah,
feel like a human.
yeah, and not completely be the shut-in that Rocky had been for so long. You know, I don't know how long he lived with his mom before Sumner. You know, you said Sumner got legal custody of him in 2001, but I don't know how long before that Rocky had basically just become so accustomed to the lifestyle that, you know, the everyday Rocky of nothing matters but this Publishers Clearinghouse fucking piece of mail and shit. You know,
right.
that's where Rocky's head was. And so, you know, and I'm sure Sumner doesn't always remember Rocky being that way, you know, which is a hard thing. I would assume a hard thing to go through is watching your older brother, I'm sure, was somebody that he looked up to at one point in his life, and just kind of become the shell of a human, because that's really what happened with Rocky. Is
you're just watching your sibling disintegrate little by little, you know.
Yeah, he you know, at points before Rocky was starting to do music again, you know, I think Sumner was really trying to get him to remember or just want to do those things for himself again, and Rocky kind of pushed back in the beginning, and so I couldn't imagine, like you were saying, what their home life was for the years that it took to get Rocky back on his feet. And then
he did. He did absolutely a great job. I mean, thank God for his little brother. I don't know what become of the other brothers that he had. I really do.
I don't remember hearing too much about them in the documentary, other than maybe, and I could be wrong on this. I haven't watched it in quite some time, but I want to say that they were asked to be part of the documentary, but they chose not to, and respectfully so. If that's the case, I don't know what these guys' situation was with their mom. I don't know what their situation was with Roky, and I don't know what their situation was with even Sumner at this point. But
I do know that I remember hearing that when Roky did live with his mom, not only was he not taking his meds and going through his electronic friends and stuff like that to relax, but he also had a son out of one of his marriages. I do not know which marriage it was or what his son's name was, but he wasn't able to see his father, and Roky wasn't able to see his son due to the conditions that he lived in with his mother and his mental instabilities as well. Yeah,
because around that time, Roky, I'm sure, would have not been considered legit as far as parenting goes. You can see in the documentary that, like I said, Roky, at points in his own mind around that time that he was living with his mom, he was childlike almost. Like we've already mentioned plenty of times, the Publishers Clearinghouse thing. He was giddy like a little kid about this. Like this was his first time ever hearing about this, and he was 100% sold on the fact that because it came to his house in the mail that he was gonna win it. He was bound to. And like legit. I said, there was a part that he asked somebody. I remember him distinctly. He was carrying around a Mr. Potato Head, and he said, "Can I have this?" And they said yes. And Roky was like giddy about it, like a kid would be getting a brand new toy, you know what I mean? So Roky was, and it's sad because if you know anything about Roky and you listen to his music, this is a dude that, and I could say this a million times about him, because it's a scary thing to me, that somebody could be so fucking absolutely talented, or just a normal everyday person. It doesn't matter. Just your regular ass everyday person, and then boom, this switch flips, and you're not nothing. You're 100% opposite of what you were. Totally different person, and so I think that was.
It goes on to say, that can happen really with anybody.
That's
any type of mental illnesses.
Yeah, that's why I think that things like that have always stuck with me, and Roky's story stuck with me, is because we know, as people that listen to Roky's music, that at one point, Roky was this absolutely regular ass fucking dude that just jammed out, and then next thing you know, he's in a mental institution, and he comes out and he has like the mentality of a child. And it was because of all the, him going through what he went through, him having schizophrenia, not being on the right medication, using drugs in his earlier life. Kind of almost reminiscent to kind of Syd Barrett-ish,
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Because
that's something that I've read about. That's something that I've, kind of made me relate Roky's story to Syd. Is, never really knew the whole story of Syd, but their stories could be very well compared as far as these guys that got in over their heads, and maybe. The crazy part about it is maybe these dudes were onto something like genius, in their minds, but really none of the shit that they're saying makes sense. But it's almost like they became the shell of a person that they were, and so yeah,
sad.
I would say that Rocky and Sid's story is comparable, and anybody else that is gone through this, being one way at one point in your life, and then it just something happens, and it's totally, your brain is totally like a switch went off, and you're just the shell of this person that you once were. And I think that's what stood out to me about Rocky, was not just what Rocky went through, and Rocky's early life, and him starting the 13th floor elevators, and his run-in with the law and whatnot, but it's more so seeing Rocky go through all of this, and then at some point Rocky would not only start releasing music again, remastering certain songs that he had wrote years and years ago, but also getting back out on stage again.
Yeah, and he actually there's I don't know if you've seen it, Chris, but I do know that I watched a little bit of it earlier this morning when I was setting up drinking my coffee. It's where he's at Austin City Limits, and Billy Gibbons is there with him playing on stage, and they did a whole set, and it's actually a decent quality of recording for YouTube when he did this. And he did Two-Headed Dog, he did I'm Gonna Miss You.
Creature with a Ham Brain. Yeah, I have seen this that you were talking about, and I definitely remember Billy Gibbons playing guitar. I believe Rocky played rhythm guitar during that, and yes, Billy Gibbons was doing all the lead. So these guys that looked up to this dude, not just Sumner, Sumner started getting Rocky's life and back on the right path. But all these musicians that Rocky influenced over the years, they would try to, like you said, bring Rocky back into this, getting him to, perform again. And it was for nothing other than seeing this dude do what he loved to do at one point in his life before all this fucking madness took over. And to know, the crazier part about it is to know that if you've watched the documentary and you've seen the absolute downward spiral that Rocky was at one point, you don't even think in the back of your head that it's not even in your head that this dude will ever be back on a stage ever again in his life. That's how far gone, Rocky was.
Yeah, he was very far gone. It's a very sad story, but I will never forget when I lived in Florida and then I came back to here.
Oh, that's something so I think I know what you're going to bring up, and I was going to touch on that too. Are you talking about
the bobblehead?
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool because I had came back here for vacation from Florida, and
well, you had lived in so first of all, just to give a little bit of context to this, you had moved down to Florida, and you and I hadn't seen each other. I mean, obviously always kept in touch, but we hadn't actually been able to spend time together in a little while. So I think there's some importance to that being, the first time that you came back up here, pretty much that would happen. But yeah, I'll let you tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, so I get up here and Chris is telling. You were telling me about this Roky Erickson bobblehead, and I said, well, if you get a chance, could you please go and check it out for me? And
now this is before you came up here for vacation.
Right.
that you and I talked about this.
Absolutely.
And it was actually quite some time. It was over 6 months, I want to say.
Yeah, I said, if they have it, could you please purchase this for me? I will pay you for it. Whether I got to send you the money and pick it up when I come up the next time, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't get a chance before you had come up to get back to the Medina area because I was working in Wellington and living in Wellington at the time. So then go ahead.
And then when me and the wife comes up, and I'm like, Chris, where is this place at? And you're like, oh, well, you know what? Let's go eat at the Chinese place. It's a nice place to eat. Let's go have dinner there.
The Dragon Buffet there.
Yeah, and then we go and we have, well, it was lunchtime, I believe.
Yeah, we had lunch there together.
So we went to go have lunch there, and then we walked over to, what was it? Was the name of the store again?
So it would have been a Record Exchange, but when the Record Exchange became the Exchange, it's the Exchange in Medina, Ohio.
So we go into the store, and now, mind you, this is half a year later?
Oh, this is probably, more than almost
a year?
Yeah, maybe almost a year later when I had talked to you about it being there.
So we go into the store, and little and behold, the Roky Erickson bobblehead doll was still there. And it's actually up on my wall right now in the box. And they only made so many of them. I forget how many of them they made, but
I think it was like 1,500 or something like that. But the crazier part to that story is two things. Had I not known about Roky Erickson, I would have walked right past that bobblehead, and it would have never meant anything other than it was just some random bobblehead.
Yeah.
Right. And two being, I couldn't believe that a company actually made a Roky Erickson bobblehead. It blew my mind that I was standing in a store, and all these years I had known who Roky was before seeing it in the store, but never really seeing anything merchandise-wise for Roky. And just the first thing I stumble across is him as a bobblehead. It was fucking mind-blowing to me that it was even a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it was a thing, because he's actually up on my wall, like I said, on a shelf in a box. And like I said, I don't care how many they made. I'm just glad that I have one.
Yeah, it doesn't even. It's one of those things where it doesn't even matter the worth value of it.
No, because I wouldn't sell it. I would never sell it. Number one. And it was meant for me to get it, because if it wasn't, somebody else would have already bought it.
Yeah, I really actually could not believe when we walked back in there. I expected it to be gone.
Gone, yeah. Yeah. I will have to say that when I was in Florida, I actually got to watch the documentary that we were talking about, You're Gonna Miss Me, and I sat down and I showed it to my wife, and she's like, oh my gosh, you always get me hooked on these people, and they're no longer here, and I feel so bad for these people. Well, actually, Roky was still alive. So
yeah, Roky
at that point in time.
Yeah, Roky.
But later on,
it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy that, that's kind of what I expected the documentary to end on when I first watched it. Was
you and me both.
I expected Roky to have, passed away because of his whole story. And all the shit that he had went through. But Roky lived until May 31st of 2019 is when Roky passed. And he had already completely, you look at Roky in 2017. Now there is I believe it's, I don't know who all's familiar with Nardwuar, but he is one of the craziest interviewers I've ever seen. And those who know Nardwuar know what I'm talking about. Nardwuar is a dude that when he interviews people, he knows absolutely everything down to the smallest detail that not anybody else would be able to find out. There are musicians, there's whole compilations of Nardwuar blowing musicians' minds with his knowledge on things. There was I believe it is a Nardwuar interview where Roky still kind of seems not himself, but I don't remember what year the Nardwuar interview took place. I do know that towards the end of Rocky's life, you could tell he got everything, damn near everything back that he once lost, as far as his some, mind, yeah, and then some. So Rocky's story is really a crazy story to know that he, all these things that this dude went through, that for anybody else could have died from these things. Anybody else could have ended up never, Roky could have never made it out of that mental institution. Roky it could have gotten to the point where Sumner never got custody of him. So many things could have went really, really bad in Rocky's story, but just to know that he was it's crazy to know that what I saw, Roky was able to completely go back to pretty much a damn near normal person of who he was,
Yeah, and can you imagine though, later on in life, seeing bigger crowds than you ever saw in your earlier years?
Yeah, because and I'm sure the 60s were crazy, the 60s were the time of, definitely, that's why, if we're talking about the 60s and psychedelics and weed, they pretty much go hand in hand, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of crazy. It's not crazy that Roky would dabble in these things. But more so,
I'm talking about like the venues themselves, like the buildings.
Oh yeah, because
being on stage,
even the show with Billy Gibbons, I'm sure, was probably one of the bigger shows that he's ever done.
Yeah, and can you imagine though being in the '60s and doing that to in a small venue, and then compared to being in the 2000s and doing something humongous, even though you're not doing Woodstock in the 60s or something like that, but you're not doing the Woodstock in the 2000s. But imagine the amounts of people that are able to fit into a bigger building in the 2000s compared to the ones in the 60s. In his mind, that's got to be crazy.
So the bobblehead that you have is limited to 1,000, and for people that know of Roky Erickson, the bobblehead is based on his 1980s look, where it was where he referred to himself as the evil one.
Yes. Yeah, that's the bobblehead that I have. The bobblehead is let's see. Mine is okay. Yeah, mine's the limited edition. Mine is 212 out of 1,000. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So, which is not that price matters because I know that you're never gonna sell that bobblehead, but to collectors and stuff, those lower numbered ones, in regards to 200, a number 200 would be probably worth more than something like a number 700 or right. Something like that, the later numbers. But it was just crazy to me to see that they made this Roky
honestly
Erickson
wouldn't have cared
bobblehead.
if it was 1,000 out of 1,000, honestly, because that's just how much I wanted it. So
the bobblehead, so the DVD or the You're Gonna Miss Me documentary released in 2005. The bobblehead released in May of 2009. So 4 years after the documentary was done.
hmm And like again, I said, what was it, 2001, when his younger brother Somner had started the court proceedings to get custody of him. So shortly after that, then that's
Which, I mean,
when they
we can even talk about those court proceedings in the sense of, I don't now again. It's been a little while since I've
yeah, me as well.
It's been a little while since I've seen this. But what was I getting at?
Or are you going to talk about his mom being in court?
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for reminding me. Basically, if I remember correctly, his mom really didn't do herself any favors in the way of the court proceedings and as far as her mental state went.
Well, not at all. She was definitely angry. And she was also trying to be a little bit too much of this is my baby type thing, and kind of like putting Roky out there as like he was an invalid.
Like Roky could not make decisions for himself, and Roky was not capable of taking care of himself, and I think Sumner knew otherwise, obviously.
Well, he wasn't really given a chance to show anybody what, that he could take care of himself, or at that point in time of his life, because, I mean, his mom could barely take care of her, let alone her and her son.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't even touch on, you remember the weird, like, home videos that they would make around that time where Rocky's mom, like, she called him, like, a king and stuff, and they put on plays almost, and so it's almost like, Rocky's mom kept him in this childlike state. And not that I'm saying that there's anything wrong with doing these plays with your mom, but Roky was obviously going through a lot of shit mentally during this time, and I think this was more of like, let's do this type of stuff, and you don't have to worry about taking these meds.
Or you know what? It could have been just because she maybe thought that Roky was going to possibly pass away before she did, or I don't even know if she's still alive. I have no clue.
I do not know if his mom has passed. I would assume.
But maybe she thought that she would get some of these royalties and stuff from what he did before.
Yeah, and I don't. Here's my thing. At the very least, okay, if I was in the same situation, I guess, I don't understand why. Okay, if Roky was mentally incapable at this time and he was off these meds, that's one thing. But I guess I'll never understand why his mom didn't fight for him to get these royalties and this money and shit that was owed to him, because I mean, you look into things now, like, not that people make a shitload of money off of streams or anything like that, but this is during a time where Roky is already living in poverty. He's barely able to I'm sure living on like disability or something along the lines of that, because of his, or who even knows? I don't even know if his mom fought for that. So, this, again, is all money that Roky could have used to take care of himself or, better his situation during this time, which was really a rough spot in his life if you watch the documentary. And, it's I guess it's just crazy to me that she at the very least she could have said, hey, we're going to get you this money that you deserve. It was like that was not even a focus.
Yeah, I would think that, even if she couldn't do it herself, that she could have contacted her other children and explained, and then
or I don't know where she was at financially, probably not in a good place herself, but somebody, Sumner might even have stepped up, and I'm sure he did after he got custody of him, but hired an attorney that looks into all of these things as a musician, because you could say, I guess I don't know whether these releases were independent releases, but either way, anytime they were played or spun somewhere, Roky should have been making money from that. Anytime that music was used for anything, Roky should have made money from that.
Well, I mean, he did get his money later after, his younger brother. I don't know how much more, he got or anything, or if he got it all, but I'm sure he got some of it after his younger brother had stepped up, sought an attorney, and then got him to where he could start getting his royalties and everything like that from his music.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, that money could have been used to better him as far as his care and everything, which I would assume, Sumner stepped in financially at first, but once Roky was back on his feet and able to get this money, which, Sumner could have been completely like his mom, and once Roky got back on his feet, been like, well, this money's all mine now. But he wasn't like that, you know what I mean?
No,
and Roky, super lucky to have that person in his fucking life, because who knows where Roky probably would have died a lot sooner than what he did, because even the shit that he was going through with his teeth, which could have killed him for sure, was very bad. I remember during around that time, and just his overall living conditions. You said he got in trouble during the time that he was living in the assisted living. It was a low income. Oh, it was a low income housing, not assisted living. I'm sorry.
He actually got in a little bit of trouble just for getting in somebody else's mailbox. I think it was more like it could have been a fine, a small fine or a slap on the wrist. I mean, he wasn't put in jail for it.
Right.
Because obviously he did have problems, and he probably didn't mean to get in somebody else's mailbox. He probably meant to get in his own mailbox at that point in time.
Yeah, but this is during a time where, definite things are still spiraling out of control for Roky.
Or who knows? Maybe he wanted to get another Reader's Digest or Publisher Clearinghouse card. I don't know. Poor guy.
Roky's life at that point was pretty much, you could say, unstable. Again, I think that the dude is one of the luckiest people that I've ever seen come out of such a crazy fucking situation. And it's insane to me that I was able to find out about Roky, find out about his story, and then find out that by the time that his story was almost done being told, Roky was in the process of already getting his life back together, So it was nice to go back to that and see that this pretty much 180 of a person, because during that time, man, I don't know, anybody that's watched the documentary, and if you haven't seen it and you do see it, there's definitely a multiple points where you lose hope for this dude, and that person is, it's almost like that person is in there somewhere, and especially the people that knew him personally. You know, we didn't even touch on, things that his bandmates would have thought during this time, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Tommy
Absolutely.
Hall, was, I would assume, one of his best friends, co-founder of the Elevators. And I can only imagine what those guys who knew Rocky to be this person all this time, and then Rocky is no longer that person. And probably, for the most part, it sounds like his mom didn't allow those people around him.
Yeah, I mean, in the documentary, you don't really see Rocky getting any visits other than the people who are filming the documentary.
And he was even sketched out about that, if I remember correctly.
He really was. Yeah, he was. He didn't know why these people were going to come into his mother's home. And then when they told him, he's like, "Oh, okay," you know. So, but I mean, there's multiple interviews that even though when you played "You're Gonna Miss Me" at the beginning of the show, you can hear him talking to somebody in that documentary, and he's
that's the "Goodbye, Sweet Dreams."
Yeah, you can actually hear them talking in that song. And they're asking him questions, and he's just going, right along with everything, not knowing whether or not it's going to benefit him or what he's even really talking about.
Well, and before this, I remember Sumner trying to get him to play music, and Rocky. I don't know if it was like he didn't remember or if he didn't want to remember, but it was almost like Rocky was. I don't know if he was incapable of doing it, or as far as his state of mind went, or it was almost like Rocky didn't even remember being this person that wrote this music. I don't know where he was, but that I do remember the "Goodbye, Sweet Dreams" when he played that on that deck, being the first time that they had gotten him to play a song in quite some time. I guess the better way to word it would be consistently play a song, in a sense of he was no longer afraid to pick up this guitar and just let loose like he once did, where before this he was kind of standoffish about. I don't know if it was him not wanting to get back into music or he wanted to kind of leave that behind him. I think that they kind of leave that up to you to figure out, because nobody knows where Rocky was mentally during that time. So I don't know if it was, like I said, him not wanting to remember this person who he was, him being absolutely incapable of playing an instrument because of where he was, and obviously timing him singing, and I don't, who knows? He might have not even remembered the lyrics to songs that he wrote. I don't think anybody really.
Dreams that you had played on the show earlier, and when you said that you remember him sitting on the back deck, that was at his younger brother's house.
Yeah,
at the end of that.
Yep.
At the end of that documentary, which was a beautiful home in Pittsburgh, PA. And then they're like, "Hey, could you play us something?" And he's like, "Well, I guess. I'm sure."
Okay.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden he's like, "Yeah, I just wrote this." And it's just like, wow, that's just amazing.
But I mean, you can go, I don't know.
Come up with all this.
There are some real dark points of Rocky as well. Around the time that it's before he even referred to himself as the evil one. There was some darker things going on in Rocky's head. I don't know if it was in the actual documentary on Netflix, but I do know that it is on the DVD version. Rocky talking or reading a poem that he wrote, and I believe it's called "I Know the Hole in Baby's Head," and it's really, really strange and out there. So, there was that whole side to him too. You touched on it a little bit when we were talking about him forming the aliens in that interview that he did, where he said that he wore many robes or many clothes, and that he felt like
the robe of many colors. Yes.
Yeah, and he felt like all these different people. Rocky was still obviously going through mental shit during that time, and that's before he really started to
been using the drugs still back then too,
Yeah, I don't really know his story when he got out of that mental institution as far as what exactly went on in his life, but I do know seeing that documentary and knowing who Rocky was before that, because there's not a single person really, even his ex-wives that I remember, maybe it was one ex-wife or an ex-girlfriend that was in the documentary, still did not have bad things to say about the dude. There's not too many people that knew Rocky that had anything bad to say about this dude, other than the fact that he liked to eat acid and smoke weed. And I do remember Tommy, or maybe it wasn't Tommy, maybe it was the drummer, or maybe it was Tommy and he was a drummer for another band. I remember specifically a person from the band sitting behind a drum kit in the documentary, and they were talking about a time that they tripped with Rocky on acid, and Rocky, basically talking about Rocky's love for acid. So it wasn't like, Rocky unwillingly did these things.
No.
These were things that he enjoyed to do, and like I said earlier, people that have schizophrenia, sometimes you don't even know, and there have been cases where people have smoked weed, and this schizophrenia is almost like released in them. It's something that they've lived with, but it never like affected them or was at the forefront, of their mind. So Rocky's early life and experimenting with fucking drugs, especially psychedelics. And I wouldn't say just experimenting with them, but it's experimenting with them to the amount and the number of times that he used.
Yeah, it could have. Well, earlier on in his life, he could have been diagnosed as a schizophrenic, but it never came up until he did these things, and then that triggered everything.
Yeah, and it definitely made Rocky, I'm sure at some points, no different than anybody that's ever eaten acid. I'm sure at some points in his mind, he thought he unlocked the gate for the fucking universe. You know what I'm saying? And knew all of this shit. But I think the amount of times that you use and the amount of times that you start to fall deeper and deeper down that fucking hole, Rocky definitely ended up losing himself.
Definitely,
and then
as did his family. They lost him too. So.
Oh yeah, everybody that knew Rocky. Again, back to comparing it to the Sid Barrett story. All those dudes that were around Sid. This was a guy that was their best fucking friend, and by the end of the fucking band, they didn't even have the heart to fire him. They would just still let him come up on stage while they played, and Sid had no fucking clue where he was. These are dudes that loved this guy, and Sid probably didn't even know who they were. He didn't even, by the end of Sid mentally spiraling down, Sid probably didn't even have a clue that he was on stage performing with Pink Floyd. And at some points wasn't even performing. They just didn't have the heart to fire the dude, so they just let him like let him. I remember hearing stories where a member of the band said at one point, he would tell Sid that he was going to the store for cigarettes. He would go play an entire show with Pink Floyd and come home, and Sid would still be in the same position that he was when he left. So, I mean, that's where we're at mentally, you know. So these are people that loved Roky, and then Roky was no longer this person that they even knew anymore. And Roky may have, you know, he might not even have recognized these people at points. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I do know that his situation was really, really fucking bad. And I think that's even an understatement. If you've ever watched anything about any type of psychological things or anything to do with your mind, Roky was definitely pretty far gone.
Yeah, definitely was. Mental illness again, you know.
Well, and this is a time where mental illness wasn't even, you know, probably wasn't even a thing that was acknowledged.
Yeah.
You know, mental illness probably was already there, and experimenting with drugs, like you were just getting ready to say, just went hand in hand for making the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like loading a gun.
Yeah, so, you know, it's Roky's story is, you know, if anything, the thing that you should take away from inspiring to know that you could potentially be in this place mentally, but you don't always have to be there. You know what I'm saying?
You don't have to stay in that state of mind. As Roky did, he went on to back to his career.
Yeah, and performed with people that I'm sure Roky wasn't even aware of. You know, who knows if he was even aware of who ZZ Top was around the time. I mean, he was making music in the 80s and shit, so he had to have known some of these people, but maybe not personally. And even if he did, they stepped into his life, and basically not just Sumner, but these other guys, like you said, Michael Stipe and REM as a band, and Billy Gibbons. These were all people that helped him
basically welcome him home, you know.
Yeah, and he would go on to play with a lot of other musicians, and a lot of other musicians would go on to I would assume at the very least go to these shows of Roky's, you know, especially if you looked up to them.
Well, and you know, Billy Gibbons and ZZ Top themselves were a Texas band as well. So, you know, them guys probably grew up listening to Roky and the 13th Floor Elevators, and you know, and probably followed a lot of his music. So, very sad story, but a very great story at the same time.
So, in 2015, there was an article on him, it's called the Austin Chronicle, and it chronicled his recovery, right? And Roky had eventually weaned himself off of his medication in 2015, played 11 gigs that year, got his driver's license, bought a car, and fucking voted. So Roky accomplished that in 2008, 7 years after his brother, no, this is 2005. So in 2005 he did this. 4 years after his brother got custody of him, he had already played 11 gigs, got his driver's license, bought a car, and voted at the end of 2005.
That's pretty incredible, isn't it?
So obviously, you know, like you said, Sumner played a huge part in getting him back on his feet, but also these other musicians that really looked up to him. And then I think in 2008 he played 13th Floor Elevator songs for the first time, and it would have been at that point, I believe, decades. I don't remember the band. I think there was a band, but it wasn't the Explosives, and it wasn't any of the other bands that he had been in that did the background music for him, played lead for him and shit during that time. So, Roky was able to pretty much, I guess you could say, come full circle, which is kind of what I was getting at the very least. What you can take away from Roky's story is fucking being inspired by somebody like Roky. That you see this dude on top of the world at one point in the late 60s, and he wouldn't even make the money like he would later go on to make, in the later years. In the early 60s, I'm sure musicians made money, but not like he would end up getting for royalties and stuff like that. But yeah, so I mean, he pretty much came. I shouldn't even say pretty much. His life was full circle. He started off great, went downhill very fast, spiraled out of control, came back a little bit, then kind of fell in again, and then, once Sumner got custody of him, his whole life kind of would start to go back the way that it did in the beginning, where Roky was back to being this person in the spotlight, and maybe Roky never wanted that, and I don't think people wanted that vicariously to live through Roky either. Like I don't think Sumner wanted Roky to get back up on stage for any other reason that he knew that's what Roky loved. His heart was in music from the get-go. This is a dude that learned how to play guitar, or started learning how to play guitar at 10 years old, wrote his first song at 15, was in his first successful band at the age of 18. This dude that was all he knew, you know what I mean? So, and I'm sure Sumner just tried to reinforce the effect that Roky had on so many people's lives. And Roky probably wasn't even aware of the effect that, we're just regular ass fucking random dudes sitting here talking about Roky. Pretty much your regular everyday dude. And, it was part of our life. You know what I'm saying? So, Roky, I think, touched more people than he probably even realized, and, even during a time where he was down and out, there were still people that were interested in what was going on with Roky's life and interested in Roky's music and still listening to Roky's music during that time.
Yeah, and again, if a lot of these people may not know who Roky Erickson is or the 13th Floor Elevators, I didn't until I really watched this documentary.
And I wouldn't have known
their songs. Yes, I've heard their songs, but I really didn't know who it was.
Right.
Until I started watching this documentary on them. And for the people who don't know who this is, my suggestion is to look it up on YouTube. Type in Roky Erickson. You can find out a lot about his music.
You can listen to all of his music. And to be honest with you, he's a musician that he has music that I think, even if Roky Erickson and the Aliens aren't their type of thing, when Roky released a full version of the song For You, it actually has almost a southern or like country vibe to it. So Roky made music that almost damn near anybody could whatever type of music you're into, there's probably a Roky Erickson song out there that you can listen to, whether it's a 13th Floor Elevator song or, any other band that he's in. There's probably a song that you could either relate to or you would actually enjoy. So,
here's another thing too, Chris. Usually around Halloween, a lot of his old songs, when he wrote like Night of the Vampire, Demon of the Night, all that stuff, those are all kind of like cradled into like, Halloween, the holiday Halloween.
Definitely have become kind of a staple in my life around Halloween. So I definitely know what you're saying, and he definitely had he was, I think Roky himself was big on Halloween. He released that album with the Explosives. It was Halloween Live, it was called, and it was songs from 79 to 81. And so like you were saying, Rocky's music around Halloween time, especially the aliens and stuff like that. His music with the aliens and the explosives and things like that. Became major things. I definitely know that. And the weirder part about what you're saying is the first two 13th Floor Elevator releases, the one in 66 and the other one in 67, those were both released in October. So
that's kind of strange.
Even the 13th Floor Elevators music was being released in October. Now the third one that was released, Bull in the Woods, that was released in March of 69, like I was saying, but that was a year after Roky was diagnosed with the schizophrenia and probably around the time that Roky got arrested. But yeah, back to reiterate what you were saying about him and Halloween. There's definitely, if you're a fan of horror movies or anything like that, there's definitely a horror vibe about a lot of Rocky's late or middle 70s music all the way into the 80s had this, like horror vibe to it. Even the names of his songs, all of that shit, And I'm sure that there were underlying reasons why Roky wrote these songs or that they came into his mind. There's definitely transformations of Roky. But yeah, like I said, I definitely around Halloween time. I'm sure you're probably the same way. Where Roky is probably on your playlist somewhere, and
he is.
His music has, especially the aliens vibe. It has a very Halloween style vibe to it, or a darker vibe, I should say.
Yep, actually, I have them. I actually have a Halloween playlist for Halloween on my Spotify, and he's definitely one of the ones on there that I like to listen to, and not just for Halloween, but just about any time because I do enjoy his music. He's different. The time was different. Time was different for, more so for me than for you. Well, for you than it is for me because I like a lot of classic stuff. Not saying I don't care for none of the new, but I listen to a lot of classic stuff, and classic rock is definitely one of my go-to genres of music.
Yeah, for sure.
This is definitely different than most classic rock.
Yeah, I mean,
and I still enjoy it.
You can compare. We could even compare things to Roky wrote stuff that kind of. I wouldn't say it's on the same page as like Black Sabbath or things like that, but it definitely had a darker vibe to it, and there were very few bands doing that kind of stuff. Black Sabbath being one of them, Rocky being another, Pentagram, which kind of still underrated. Bands like that just were bringing this. Not that these people were like, devil worshippers. Rocky talked about the devil or demons and things like that, but I think Rocky went through these weird ups and downs in his life, and I think his music is more so an explanation of those darker times that Rocky might have had. And like I said, there is, a horror element, and like you were saying, a horror element to Rocky's music, especially in the 80s. Songs like you were talking about, Night of the Vampire, I Walked with a Zombie, Two-Headed Dog, I Think of Demons, Creature of the Atom Brain, which you brought up before. All of these songs had this darker vibe to them, but not all of Rocky's music is like that either. You could turn on something totally different later years of Rocky, and it's almost this totally different, like brighter experience, or more a light and not so dark sound to it, and same could be said kind of with 13th Floor Elevators. They were I think they were a band that just, to me, you watch that 13th Floor Elevator You're Gonna Miss Me video from the 60s, those motherfuckers just look like they were having a great time, the time of their life. You know what I mean?
They probably were.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's another thing that could be said about Rocky is both ends of the spectrum, both ends of, there was this light side of Rocky and also a dark side of Rocky, and the same could be said about his music, as far as, the songs that he wrote and things like that. There are albums out there that most people probably aren't even aware of, and that's a cool thing about Rocky is if you're just now finding out about him, there's a shitload of music to delve into. He's an artist that released quite a bit of music. So
it wasn't really recognized a lot.
Either, right. Not well known, wasn't played on the radio, shit like that. Not like I enjoy a lot of classic rock myself, but I find myself to be bigger on bands that I feel were kind of underrated in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s even. And not that I have a problem with these bigger bands, because, I'm not the biggest Floyd fan, but Floyd is interesting enough that I would listen or I would read into things that happened to them, and it's still interesting to me. So even if it's not, you could say that about Rocky, even if Rocky's music is not your cup of tea, like you were saying.
His
stories is interesting enough. And the music that he made is interesting enough. And so it's like, even though I might not listen to a lot, I definitely I have a love for classic rock. And there are a lot of, I guess, bigger name classic rock bands that I like. But more of them, I believe, I'll always respect everything that everybody does, because no matter who is in a band during what period of time, there's always a story behind how that band formed, and chances are those dudes or girls, guys and girls mixed, went through some shit together. You know what I mean? Almost every band story that you hear about, there's a reason why they became musicians, and how they got to where they got is a story in itself. And I think that Rocky's story is just maybe a little bit more involved than most other musicians, and it's a story that probably a lot of people aren't even aware of. So that was obviously the reason why I think it was important that we did this, and not only that, but it gives us a reason to talk about Rocky and our love for him.
Absolutely. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did too. You know, everybody who's listening to it, or people who are just now tuning in to listen, go back and listen to the beginning. You know, so.
Yeah, and like no different than any of my other videos, this video will remain up. I have no plans of removing any videos from my channel for any reason. Yeah, I think it was just important that we touch on Rocky's life, and because again, the musicians that I've already talked about, whether it's modern musicians like Sleep Token or like my buddy Sevidemic, these are all musicians that not only I have the utmost respect for, but they definitely were a part of my life at some point or another, or still are, you know. I'm no different than my dad, you know. We both still listen to Rocky's music, and I'm sure a lot of people will listen to Rocky's music long after he's been gone, you know. But I think it's important that if there are these stories to tell, and maybe introducing somebody to Rocky that's never heard Rocky, whether it be the young generation or, you know, where I'm at in life now age-wise, where my dad's at in life now age-wise, I think Rocky is a story and a musician that he's just, his story stands out to me, and it stood out to my dad. Obviously, that's why he contacted me and told me about the documentary, and I think that a lot of other people will have that same feeling if they know about Rocky or anything that he went through. And like you said, Dad, there's a lot of interviews with him. I don't know how many interviews there are in the 60s with Rocky, but there are definitely interviews in the 80s and probably mid to late 70s.
Yeah, there's even, I do believe there's even some in the 2000s as well.
Oh, yeah. There was one not terribly long before he passed that I listened to some of it. You know, Rocky I don't even know. Rocky might have been involved in a podcast or two. It's just crazy to me that that dude's life, like I said, the best way to sum it up is it was full circle.
My wife says it makes you just want to hug him.
Yeah, that's really not a lie, man.
For real.
There are times watching that documentary, like I said, him sitting in that basement, that like specific scene, it gives me chills, man, because I know, because you know, as somebody watching it, that this is, regardless of if it's Roky Erickson or whoever it is, this is a person at the end of the day that you can just see how broken of a person that they are. And
if you have any compassion for human beings at all,
that's
what it makes you feel like, you know.
Well, and that's kind of the point for all of this is bringing that compassion out for these musicians, or empathy for not just musicians, but people in general that have these same interests or likes, and just want to find a place that you can bullshit or listen to music, or regardless of if you share the same interest for the same bands and whatnot. I think that the end result is people should, if you walk away from the Roky Erickson documentary and you didn't feel anything, then
something's wrong.
I don't really know what to say about you as a person, and probably don't want you to be any part of my life. And that's not to shit on anybody or be offensive or anything, but it's just like, I think that that's something. If you walk away from it and you don't feel those things, then I would question, because any person with compassion or empathy for another human being, I feel like the only way that you're going to walk away from a story like Rocky's is touched. And I kind of hope that if you never see the documentary, if you're never able to see it, I hope that the things that we talked about here make you feel that way for or about Roky, in the best way that we could explain things and the things that we know about Roky or have found out about Roky over the years. If you're into music at all and you follow any type of band for a certain period of time, or anything like that, and you look into their background, some people, it changes their views of people, but to me, Rocky's music made more sense after I knew the things that he had been through, because I'm sure at points he definitely did feel like a fucking alien, or a vampire, or this person that basically became a hermit and separated himself from society as a whole. And I think his story just says a lot.
It does.
But yeah, I think we're at the 2 hour and 11-minute mark. Again, I think with any other podcast, especially this one, my dad and I could sit here and talk about Roky for days and go in circles about Rocky's life story and the music that he made. And I think this was just a really good way to put down our thoughts on Roky. Our thoughts on Rocky's story, on his music, and
hopefully motivate everybody else to dig in a little bit and check him out. And if not his documentary, check out his music.
Yeah, and at the very least, you walk away with some knowledge of something that this person that you might never even heard of before in your life. What they went through, and the ability that to change, to change your circumstances, your situation, to not give up hope, because if you can walk away and see what Roky accomplished, there definitely is you can't give up on crazy shit in life, or it's pretty much just a ride. And
there's always hope.
I think Rocky's story, that's pretty much the best way to sum it up all together, is if you're able to catch that documentary, you walk away knowing not only that Roky went on to better his life, but to completely become probably who Roky was meant to be the whole time. And so it's just to be informative, to let people know that this is shit that I care about, shit that my dad cares about, and maybe after seeing this or hearing this, whatever way you're doing it, that you'll walk away with you'll walk away with some sense of, at the very least, like we said, compassion. Just that, wow, holy fuck, this dude went through this. Even if you're not a fan of his music, this could be applied to everyday life. All of this. You just never know when shit's gonna change. So as kind of always, I guess we'll leave it there. I will leave you guys with some outro music that'll be all Rocky's, and I would have loved to show some stuff with Roky in here, but I don't want this podcast to get muted, because I think what we did talk about is at the very least informative, and I don't want that to be missed or lost. So I'll play music at the beginning and the end, and that way, if they ever decide to mute my shit, it's when the music is playing and not when we're discussing things. So I guess until next time, I'll probably catch you guys on probably another sewer stream here soon. I don't know what game I'm going to get into next, deep dive wise. But yeah, just wanted to bring my dad on here. And yeah, thanks again, Dad, for doing this, because
not a problem.
probably not another person that would have wanted to sit and talk about Roky Erickson with me for 2 hours, or that kind of had the information that you have and the want to do it. So, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and mute our mics so you guys won't hear us. And thanks for everybody that joined. If you didn't join and you're watching this later, just hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to be informed about music or video games or whatever it is, retro and modern. I am all about talking about it. So until next time, I'll catch you guys then.
Later.
For you. There ain't nothing I wouldn't do for you. Your beauty makes the sun rise for you. The moon also shines for you. For you. For you. For you, I'm cooked to you so rare. You are, and someone's there to believe me, never leave me. With you there's so many new things to be done. For you, with the tears in my eyes for you. Happiness and love meets my cry for you. Alone in my room for you. I'm brought out of the gloom for you. For you. For you.